Hello, 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 everybody. I am Jayme CheeseSlice. I am the engineer and producer of Uncontrolled Opposition. And today we're going to have a show for you about the Oklahoma City bombing, which was 31 years ago, I believe, it was April 19th. So we're almost exactly to the day. Jeremy has done a fantastic deep dive into that event and found a lot of different things that make it look like everything isn't on the up and up. It's not everything was exactly the way we were told it was. Anyhow, this show is first and foremost, it's important for you to know if you've never watched this before. This show is a radio program, and we are recording it live here on YouTube, and you'll get to see everything uncut, and there will be things that'll be on this show that won't actually be in the radio show. So we have to record it anyway. So we just said, well, why not put it on YouTube? And here we are. So let's go ahead and bring on Gloria and Jeremy. Hello, you two.
Hey, Jayme.
Are you guys ready? Let's get this done. And
let's rip.
I'll step out and hand it over to Gloria.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to Uncontrolled Opposition, where together we battle mind wars with truth strikes. I'm Gloria Guillo, an investigative journalist, and I'm here with my co-host, Professor Jeremy Kuzmarov, managing editor of Covert Action magazine. Our producer and engineer is Jayme CheeseSlice. The opinions you hear are ours, not those of WBAI, the Pacifica Foundation, or the Progressive Radio Network. This content is intended for informational and educational purposes only and should not be interpreted as professional or legal advice. Listeners are encouraged to form their own opinions. Today we will discuss with our resident professor and historian, Jeremy Kuzmarov, his article titled Oklahoma City Bombing: Was Timothy McVeigh a Patsy in a Sinister Black Flag Operation? It was published in Covert Action magazine on April 19th, 2022. April 19th is the anniversary of the Oklahoma City bombing that resulted in the death of 168 people, of which 19 were children, located in the building's daycare center. False flags are as relevant now as in 1995 and 2001 and should serve as a warning that we must never blame Washington's declared enemies without a thorough investigation, and we should always seek to discover who benefits. Cui bono, Latin for who benefits, is a Roman legal phrase associated with the brilliant orator Cicero that recommended this method of inquiry to determine responsibility and assign guilt. We also say, follow the money. With this in mind, please consider a statement released by Iran on Iran News 24 that was posted on X on April 6th this year. Dear Americans, Iran does not have the missile range to strike your country. If an attack occurs, it would most likely be carried out by your own government or Israel. Dirty bomb, anyone? So, what are false flag operations and why are they used? False flags are staged or misrepresented mass casualty events that are designed to appear as if they were carried out by an adversary for several strategic reasons: to manufacture public consent for military intervention, to justify expanded surveillance and domestic powers, to divert attention from political scandals, to stigmatize opposition movements, and to implement a strategy of tension. False flags or let it happen events deliberately foster an atmosphere of fear and instability, encouraging citizens to demand stronger government authority, emergency measures, and gladly accept curtailed liberties in exchange for perceived security, often by creating or exploiting a crisis blamed on external or fringe enemies, while advancing preset agendas. Jeremy's extensive article examines the 1995 bombing of the Murrah Federal Building, which is oddly similar to the first attack on the World Trade Center in 1993. Official accounts attributed the destruction primarily to Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols using a single truck bomb. Jeremy highlights changes to this narrative, including damage patterns to the buildings, reinforced concrete columns, witness statements, and explosive residue that was inconsistent with only an external device. These inconsistencies resoundingly suggest internal charges were also used. Witnesses reported multiple explosions. Prior intelligence warnings about threats to federal buildings were reportedly downplayed. Some ATF personnel were said to have been absent or forewarned that day, and the rapid demolition of the site limited further forensic examination. McVeigh was portrayed as the lone mastermind, despite reported links to additional figures and his limited advanced bomb making expertise. The bombing directly facilitated passage of the Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act of 1996, which expanded federal powers, curtailed certain civil liberties, and shifted scrutiny onto militia groups amid post-Waco and Ruby Ridge tensions. Interpreted in the article as part of a strategy of tension to generate fear and justify crackdowns on perceived domestic extremism. This alleged pattern appears in other U.S. cases and proposals. The 1898 explosion of the USS Maine in Havana Harbor, killing 255 crew members, was immediately blamed on Spain by much of the press, and it fueled the Spanish-American War and U.S. expansionism. The 1964 Gulf of Tonkin incident reported an attack on U.S. destroyers by North Vietnamese. Later disclassified documents showed the second attack did not occur as described, yet it secured the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, dramatically escalating U.S. involvement in Vietnam. Even more explicitly was Operation Northwoods in 1962. Get this one. A declassified plan proposed by the U.S. Chiefs of Staff, but ultimately rejected by President Kennedy, that outlined staging terrorist acts on American soil or against U.S. assets, including fake hijackings, bombings of U.S. cities, sinking a ship, or shooting down a drone airliner, then blaming them on Cuba to build public support for invasion and regime change. Across these examples, the recurrent elements involve crisis creation or exploitation, narrative control in the immediate aftermath, and policy gains that align neatly with prior goals. When tragedy leads to expanded authority or militarization, we must examine timelines, foreknowledge, beneficiary patterns, and the strategy of tension framework. Independent examination of evidence, motives, and outcomes remains essential when evaluating national tragedies. Thank you. Jeremy, please walk us through your very detailed article and note how living in Oklahoma may have helped your research.
Thank you, Gloria. Yeah, I think that was an outstanding introduction where you explained the nature of false flags and the motivation behind them, and that they have been, some may label this conspiracy theory, but in reality, they've been a feature of American foreign policy and domestic policy going back, as you point out, to the Spanish-American War, if not before that. And that is very well established as a false flag operation. There's others, such as the sinking of the Lusitania in World War I, where they planted explosives on the ship. They tried to blame Germany. And Winston Churchill actually deliberately withheld the rescue boats because I think Great Britain was behind that. They wanted to get the United States into the war and have this this incident that would outrage public opinion. As you point out in your monologue, they want to get the people to suspend rational judgment and to hate an enemy, think that this enemy has done this dastardly act. and seek revenge. I mean, it's kind of perhaps in human nature for people to react that way. So they manipulate that. And there was a British parliamentary commission that found that Winston Churchill he was the head of the British Navy at that time, deliberately withheld rescue boats so more people would die after Lusitania went down, and they blamed Germany. It was designed to build, hatred for Germany. So these are incidents that are documented historically and in parliamentary investigations. There's the Operation Gladio in Italy. There was a parliamentary investigation that uncovered how these right-wing forces that were allied with the CIA and NATO planted bombs and a terrorist act in a railway station, and they planted explosives on a left-wing journalist to make it look like the left wing was behind this terrorist act. So it's important to have that historical understanding. And I think the dominant mentality, we still see that people dismiss this. Oh, you're a conspiracy theorist, and this is, out of left field. When in fact it's a pattern in history, and it's a governing strategy of the ruling elites to get away with draconian measures that in the rational thinking people would not support, such as the legislation that Bill Clinton signed in the aftermath of the Oklahoma City bombing that was a precursor to the USA Patriot Act and eroded American civil liberties, and turned America more into a police state. And, America is a country that historically valued its civil liberties. And so the public, unless there's a crisis environment, the public is not going to sign away those liberties lightly. They have to be manipulated. So the better people understand this, the more people can be more alert and attuned to it. And they shouldn't dismiss honest researchers. And that's how we see the cover-up really extend. We can see the corruption in the media and academia, because there have been, like related to the Oklahoma City bombing, for instance, there have been a lot of critical independent investigation by journalists, but they've been dismissed or blacklisted effectively in the mainstream media and academia, which just kind of ignores it and towed the official line, and they're they're contributing to a cover up. And it's part and parcel of the corruption embedded in these institutions. So, yeah, I mean, we can go through the circumstance of the Oklahoma City bombing and some of the events. I mean, I learned about it because I moved to Oklahoma in 2009 to teach at the University of Tulsa, and I had the standard view. I was a teenager at the time, and I thought Timothy McVeigh was this white supremacist and a monster and this gun nut who did this terrible act. And in fact, I once went to a teaching event for the death penalty, and it was people who were against the death penalty. And I remember having a conversation with the guy after, and I said, "Well, I'm generally against the death penalty unless it's somebody like Timothy McVeigh, who's killed." I brought up his name directly. But then I met people. My views started to change when I met some people. One who lived near me. And somehow we got to talking about it, and he had grown up in Oklahoma City. He's a guy similar age to me, and he said, "Oh, there were two bombs, not one bomb." And he was going into some of the ideas, pointing out that people who lived there at the time didn't really believe the official story. And then I had a chiropractor who recommended we got to talking some political stuff often. He was a really nice guy from Texas who was a Ron Paul supporter and kind of anti-war. We had a lot of common views on some things, and he's more critical of the government. So anyway, he recommended some video. He was talking to me. Somehow we got on that topic, and he recommended this documentary that's cited in my article, and that was a real eye-opener. And then I, found that there were a couple good books on the topic. One by a guy, David Hoffman, who was I think he was an editor of the Berkeley Barb. He came out of the countercultural movement, the Berkeley free speech movement, and then somehow he got to investigating this, and he wrote a very good book. But yeah, it got no media attention. It was kind of blacklisted and marginalized. But the book was very, very well documented. and it pointed to false flag operation. Had all kinds of information debunking the official story, and it went along quite well with this film. And then there's also a former Tulsa police officer wrote a book named Craig Roberts. And then I actually met him because he lives outside of Tulsa, and we had lunch together. And he been on the Tulsa police force, and they actually asked him to write a report about it. And I think the FBI contracted him to do some kind of investigation relating to the bombing. And then as he investigated more, he realized that something really fishy had gone on there. And then he reported some of his findings, and like they weren't happy with the report because it challenged the official story. And I think they just like censored the report. And I mean, I don't know if he was nearing retirement anyway, but they kind of pushed him off the police force. And that was, I mean, he wasn't physically threatened, but they did. I think he felt intimidated, and he subsequently did even more research and published this book. So now these books, were with off the beat press, and they didn't get reviewed in the New York Times or any attention in mainstream intellectual circle or liberal intellectual circles. But I've been trained to assess a book, not based on the popularity of it, but assessing the evidence and the quality of the research. And these two authors, and they had worked together, Hoffman and Roberts. And it was interesting because they were Roberts can be considered kind of far right libertarian, whereas Hoffman was a left wing counter, the '60s counterculture, and they worked very well together. And both their books punctured the official story. And what was clear is that there were two bombs, and that's what the guy who was a kid and was there. He said he heard two bombs, and so it couldn't have been this fertilizer bomb. Because the official story is that there was a bomb that Timothy McVeigh drove, was this white supremacist gun nut. He hated the government, was angry over the Ruby Ridge incident where the FBI had killed this survivalist or some members of his family, and the Waco incident with David Koresh. And this was revenge for that. But it was supposedly a fertilizer bomb that destroyed the building that McVeigh built with this army buddy of his, Terry Nichols. But if there were two bombs, that story starts to break down. And then the other aspect that the Hoffman book and Roberts quoted all these experts who came on the record, top Army explosive experts like General Benton Parton was one, the founder of the neutron bomb. So these are very high level experts in explosives, and bomb making. They all said that there's no way that the fertilizer bomb, they alleged, to the Ryder truck could have caused the damage to that building, and that it had to have come from military grade weaponry. And others said that there was evidence of agents in the building in the days before. And even McVeigh, I think, had been spotted in the building in the days before. And this was like, close to nuclear grade weaponry, very heavy duty weaponry that had caused that damage. So right off the bat, that tells you something, that this is a planned operation. And then there's other aspects that I go into in the article.
For a second, discuss. When I read your article the first time, when you first wrote it, I was like, wow, this is amazing detail. And it's so complex and so thorough, the investigation, that, I had to read it again. I read it again today just to make sure, I could recall everything. And I took pages and pages of notes. So one of the things I was kind of surprised to read now that, we've actually discussed many things with Michael Riconosciuto, that he had also given a statement that to do the kind of bomb that would do this much damage, that there needed to be an electrical component, and that this was extraordinarily sophisticated. And when I read the reports, that people were discussing this kind of static electricity that occurred before the event happened. And that would have been consistent with this higher tech bomb. So I think what you had written was that Riconosciuto didn't believe that McVeigh had that level of training to do something that complex, because this is something that he had worked on personally with the CIA.
Absolutely, yeah. McVeigh had no training as a chemist, and these were extremely high-grade military weaponry. Only that could have caused that kind of damage, and McVeigh had no training in bomb making or chemistry. And Nichols was nowhere near that level. So that is another important facet. Yeah, and Riconosciuto was a scientific genius who had worked at the top levels of the CIA. You know, he was close with CIA directors, and you know, he was like one of their top scientific people. So you know, he's an important source for that. And it would only be somebody at his kind of level that could assist in development of that kind of weaponry. And we can go into McVeigh's story. Yeah, what I found about McVeigh is that he was an army. He was in the special forces. But they claim they claim that he left the army of a certain date, but researchers found that actually he was in the army much longer than officially. He was still in the army when he claimed to have left the army, and he said actually there's court records where he said that he was on a secret mission and he was told to go and do certain things, and that's why he thought he was part of a secret mission. That's how we have the indication that he was set up as a patsy, because actually when they arrested him, he was very calm and he thought his major was going to come get him from the jail. And I think he was under the impression he was supposed to deliver something. And he told this also to his cellmate. His cellmate, when he was in prison before they executed him, David Paul Hammer wrote a book, and he recorded in his book what McVeigh told them. And that's what he told them, that he was on a secret mission and he was told to do certain things. And then the fact that, and also, if this was a coordinated
talk about the MK Ultra aspect too.
Yeah, well, there are various things. Yeah, there's a lot of details. I mean, one is that there were no license plate. You pull off the major bombing of a federal building, which ordinary criminals, cannot do that unless they're incredibly sophisticated. Yet somehow the getaway vehicle had no license plate, so it means that the cops will automatically get them on the road as they try and make a mistake. So that's a red flag right away. That this is a setup, and McVeigh again was very calm because he thought it was all by plan and that his major was going to get him after the police arrested him. So that's important. The other important thing is that there were all these people with McVeigh, and they hid that fact, and that's one reason they never wanted this to go to trial, and they gave him the death penalty. So the trial was they wouldn't. It was a very controlled trial, so that none of this could come out at the trial. They wanted to make like he was the lone bomber assassin, and that, I think, the myth in American culture. I have a book coming out later this year on political assassinations and how they cultivate this myth of the lone deranged gunman or assassin. And I think that's what they tried to develop with McVeigh. But there are many eyewitnesses had him with other people at the time of the bombing. And then more evidence came to light as to who some of these people are, and that they're suspected FBI informants. And one was, some died under suspicious circumstances, like this guy Guthrie was later killed in prison, probably because he knew too much, and it was part of a coordinated, conspiracy. And conspiracies happen in history. I'm a history professor and study history, and you can say, oh, this is conspiracy theory, but I mean that is, I think, part of the cover up to brand any independent analysts or investigators conspiracy theorists, when conspiracies happen throughout history. And so we can go into other facets. Yeah, it's good that you've read it, because I wrote this article several years ago, so I may not be fresh with every single detail, but
Yeah,
it really
a couple of readings and recent ones. The other thing that you wrote was, in relation to the license plate, and it's something we see all the time, is people don't get rid of the evidence. And when I was reading, I think he left stuff in the glove compartment. I don't know if you recall that. I'd have to look it up. But he left like all these clues about what he was doing all around. And it just reminded me of that Luigi Mangione, who, was arrested in McDonald's, still had the gun in his backpack and a suppressor, and his handwritten letter criticizing the healthcare system that's referred to as his manifesto. So, it seems odd that these people who do these crimes that aren't MK Ultra, keep all this evidence on them. And it's suspicious. That's all I can say.
Well, absolutely, because if it's a criminal operation and their aim is to get away, and they don't want to spend the rest of their life in jail or go to the death penalty, they're going to try and cover up their crime. They're not going to have and plot an elaborate bombing, but then forget to have a getaway vehicle with no license plate or leave all this incriminating evidence. So that would indicate what McVeigh said. What McVeigh said, what his roommate said, his cellmate Hammer wrote, that McVeigh was told what to do and thought he was part of a military operation, and that he's still been part of the military and the secret special forces unit. And in fact, McVeigh probably had been selected because the Army and CIA are very good in doing personality assessments, and that's how they pick people for specific roles. And McVeigh was very dutiful soldier, but he was not an independent thinker. He was somebody, like, there are reports that are, I was able to access. I think it was discussed in some of the books I read, that's how the Army assessed him, as somebody who was very, very dutiful, very thorough in doing the job, very professional, but he's not an independent thinker. He's not somebody who would question what he's asked to do. So that was the perfect person for this kind of assignment. And they create this persona. And I've studied the CIA, so I have a better appreciation. They did this, that there's a pattern of how they operate. Because if you study the JFK assassination, you see how they created the persona of Lee Harvey Oswald as this left-wing guy who was a Marxist. Now, it was totally fabricated. Oswald was a CIA operative who had been a dangler who penetrated into the Soviet Union, and then he was an operative. The Fair Play for Cuba Committee was this a group that was devoted to opposing U.S. intervention in Cuba and allowing the Cuban Revolution to take fruition independently, take root independently, that the U.S. shouldn't interfere in Cuba. So the legend was that Lee Harvey Oswald, because they made him a member of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee in New Orleans, but actually there were only one member of the committee, and that was him, and one or two other people, and he started it. And they actually deliberately had him provoke a fight with an anti-Castro guy. They would have these leafleting and protests, small protests, downtown New Orleans, and they deliberately staged a fight with this anti-Castro Cuban. So then Oswald got arrested, so he got his name in the paper as a Fair Play for Cuba guy. But really, he was a CIA infiltrator because he was working for the Riley Coffee Company, which was owned by a guy, Guy Bannister, who was close with J. Edgar Hoover and was a known FBI guy who infiltrated. That was the Quinelpro, where they infiltrated left-wing groups to try and break them up and sow dissension or spy on them. So, I mean, McVeigh, they did the same thing. They created this image of this legend that he was this white supremacist, and they had him going to these gun shows and cultivating connection in that world of the white supremacists, gun, pro-gun patriots. And there was this book, The Turner Diary, anti-government libertarians. And there was this book, The Turner Diaries, which was kind of white supremacist, neo-Nazi themed book that he was allegedly a devotee of. But he became known in those circles, and they even had him going to a strip club bragging that he would be famous, like to get his name out
Well,
there.
well,
And there's evidence of body doubles, that there were different McVeighs spotted in different places at different times as they're building this legend for him. Uh, so that's part of it as well, and that's the same with Oswald. They're Oswald doubles, and they even set him up an Oswald double was in Mexico. Who went to the Cuban embassy because they wanted to cultivate this image that he was pro-Cuba and part of the fair play for Cuba. So they had an Oswald impersonator, and the CIA, they employ actors, and they're very good at costuming and design. So they create body doubles, and they stage events to create this legend. And if you study McVeigh, they did that for him. And I don't think those views were necessarily genuine of McVeigh, those extremist right-wing views. And he infiltrated this right-wing cult group that lived in the Arkansas-Oklahoma border region. And they were FBI provocateurs who carried out robberies. And that's how they carried forward the conspiracy regarding the Oklahoma City bombing through that group that McVeigh infiltrated. And there were other agents like a German guy, Andreas Strassmeyer.
Two things I'd kind of like just want to jump in. When you talked about his personality profile, and you said basically that they look for people who follow orders and do not use critical analysis or independent thought. And, one of the things we discuss on the show all the time is that how education really has been changed. And it pretty much comes under Rockefeller, who really revitalized I wouldn't use the word revitalize, altered the education system. And his main statement was that he wanted obedient workers. They didn't want people to question authority. They didn't want critical thinkers. They wanted obedient workers. And that plays in very much well with this whole MK Ultra or ability to manipulate is if we have these skills. So it's very important to question everything and use our own independent analysis. The other thing that I really wanted to bring up, and I hope you'll get to it, and, we can discuss in a little bit, is the body count of all the people around him who were suicided, and how the suicides did not jive with the wounds to the bodies. And I found that pretty fascinating. And I counted, I don't know, about 6 of them. And you had mentioned the stripper in the club, and she was found OD'd, but then they found blood handprints all over the walls. So, I mean, these suicides were crazy. Like, I think, who was Trenta do? Was that his roommate, his cellmate, or was that someone else?
No, well, first there were as you point out, there were a lot, and if you study with the JFK assassination, there were a ton of people who were assassinated after to cover it up, including a journalist, Dorothy Kilgallen, including a CIA operative's ex-wife, Mary Meyer, who had an affair with Kennedy, and she may actually have been trying to MK Ultra Kennedy while they're having an affair. She gave him LSD, and it may be part of a CIA experiment using Kennedy. Whatever the case, she was assassinated, and she knew certain secrets. So if you and then the Martin Luther King assassination, they not only, the FBI was there's strong evidence from the William Pepper investigation that the FBI murdered Martin Luther King. Not just King, they also murdered his brother, who was found dead in the swimming pool, and they said he was an excellent swimmer. They claimed he drowned, but everybody in his family said no way. He was an excellent swimmer. No way he drowned in his own pool. His mother, King's mother, was murdered in a church. So they kill members of the family. These are vicious.
They kill witnesses.
Yeah. So we have to know who we're dealing with. And these organized crime elements have taken over the American government. And I mean, look, they killed all these kids in the Oklahoma City bombing. It's
tragedy.
What these people will do, murdering children. And of course they murdered children in Iran recently, bombing a school, so a girls' school. So these are the kind of people we're dealing with here.
Well,
As far as
I just wanted to list
I
a
mean,
couple
there's
of.
this guy first, Terrence Yeeke, and actually CNN. There was a very good investigation carried out by CNN that showed clearly he was an Oklahoma City police officer who knew, he witnessed all kinds of strange things. And I think he had a dossier and he was going to the media, and then he committed suicide, but he was found like shot yards from his car, and like just the crime scene was clear. It was a murder. Almost everybody could see that. And, CNN has done an investigation. And Trent Didieu, I think, was, I'd have to refresh my memory. I know he
I
was
think
somebody else.
he was an inmate at the Federal Transfer Center in Oklahoma City, and they said that he was found hanged and considered it a suicide. And then, when I researched it, he was found bruised and battered with a gash across his throat, wounds on the back of his head, biceps, foot, and anus, which could not have been self-inflicted or be explained by a hanging. And then there was one other really vivid one too that I thought was Terrence Yeake. Am I saying
That's
that
what I
right?
was just mentioning. Yeah, the
Yeah,
cop.
and
Yeah.
he this was a cop, and he was mentioned as a suicide, but he allegedly suicided himself by slashing his forearms, cutting his throat, and then he walked 1.5 miles over rough terrain and climbed a fence before shooting himself. And this is a suicide? Are you kidding me? I mean, literally
Yeah, if people
dragged through
want to
the
end their
mud.
life, they want to end it quickly. They don't want to torture themselves and brutalize themselves
And no
and be
investigation.
in agony for hours. That's not the way people want to kill themselves. But everybody knew that was a murder, and even CNN did a report in the last several years that pointed clearly to him being assassinated. And yeah, Guthrie was one of the people who was seen with McVeigh in the Ryder truck and carried out some robberies with him, and he was killed in prison. Prison's an easy place they can kill people because they often have pay off wardens or guards, and they have mafia people in there they could easily use. And often inmates, nobody cares too much about them or asks too many questions, think they're bad people. The public doesn't get too upset when an inmate
Well,
is killed.
I
So
counted 6 associated with Timothy McVeigh. 6 murders,
McVeigh
6
himself,
suicide that sound like murders to me.
yeah, and McVeigh himself was given the death penalty, so you could argue that he was murdered. I mean, he never set out to bomb anybody, and I think his bomb was more of a diversion. So arguably, he may have been an innocent victim as well. I mean, he was. They made sure to give him the death penalty because dead men don't talk, and the trial was heavily controlled. And then McVeigh condemned his own lawyer. They wouldn't allow all these witnesses that would point to other people involved in the plot and start to expose something much larger beneath the surface. The lawyers prevented that, and that's a pattern we see in political assassination in modern America, and these false flag incidents, like the rigging of trials, like with the James Earl Ray. He was set up as a patsy in the Martin Luther King assassination, and I was reading that there was a judge. Well, they blackmailed him into pleading guilty, and then when Ray wanted to change his plea, and then a judge was hearing the case, a judge battle in Tennessee, and realized that Ray had a good legal argument, and he was going to order a retrial. And then all of a sudden, he died of a heart attack. And we know that the CIA developed heart attack drugs. That was brought out in the Church Committee hearing. So, as far fetched as this seems, there are these cover-ups and a lot of the lawyers are tainted. Like the lawyers in the Ray case, where a lot of them were mob linked, and they threw the case, and they basically admitted in the Oklahoma City case as well. And then you can look at other trials. They're more like Stalinist, show trials, and we see the corruption of the American criminal justice system. And as I argue, the Americans are conditioned to believe that America is an exceptional nation and has a great democracy and has this mission to export democracy, and the criminal justice system is corrupt in China or Russia. But if we scrutinize our criminal justice system, it's often very corrupt when involved these kind of political cases.
Well, one of the doctors that visited him in his prison cell was, I think, Jolly. Can you talk about that? He's a MK Ultra associate. Do you
Oh
recall?
yeah, there's suspicion that McVeigh was kind of programmed and conditioned, and told exactly where to go, and that's the pattern of the. If you look at these cases, the suspicion that James Earl Ray was in the military, and his family said that when he came out of the military at the end of World War II, he was changed, and it was believed he may have been subjected to MK Ultra hypnosis, and actually he was seeing hypnotists, and he had hypnotist books when he was captured. This is James Earl Ray, the alleged assassin of Martin Luther King Jr. And then you can look at the Robert Kennedy. Sirhan was a jockey, and he had an accident, and that's how he got into some hospitals, and they may have selected him for these kind of Manchurian candidate experiments. And a CIA doctor, before he died, said, I can create an assassin. Give me 6 months, I'll create an assassin. And so they developed methods using drugs and hypnotic techniques to create human that they can manipulate and transform them into assassins. And some of these sane scientists are connected. Jolien West is a key one who's connected in a lot of these cases. And the Lennon killing we had on our show, Mark David Chapman was also associated with these same psychologists and appeared to have been programmed as well and hypnotized. And often, they're compelled to write manifestos, like with Sirhan, they had him write this manifesto against Robert Kennedy and that he was supporting Israel. But all the candidates in that election were supporting Israel. And also, a lot of Sirhan's friends had said he was never a political guy. They had tried to get him to join the Students for Democratic Society, which was the leading anti-war group in the 60s. And Sirhan was not interested. He was just into his private life. So how does he come up with this manifesto? And if you read it, it's like, it's often these manifestos are very repetitive and incoherent. And there's signs of that with McVeigh, that they kind of condition him in this worldview of this white supremacist gun culture, Turner Diaries milieu, and that he was subjected to these conditioning and hypnosis and perhaps using drugs, perhaps during his military service.
When the MK Ultra doctor visits you in prison, it looks bad.
Yeah, with aroused suspicion of anybody who's familiar with the pattern. So
That's crazy. Yeah, just tremendous facts. I really hope everyone, reads it, because it's the same playbook. We just keep seeing it over and over and over again. And, once you see it, it's really hard to unsee it. So, if you go through Jeremy's article, which is really, fantastic, it's a novel in an article. And, it really gives you what to look for going forward. It gives you, a real sounding board or to jump off from, so that you can really look at what we're being told and use your critical analysis, because it'll protect you from MK Ultra. They won't take you if you can use the critical analysis. They don't want you.
And I drew off a lot of these research. I was trying to synthesize it into a kind of digestible article. Some books that have been written, like by David Hoffman and Craig Roberts, and then there were reports. There was an Oklahoma legislator, David Keyes, who investigated this as well, and he published a very valuable report. So, I mean, there is a lot of information that came to light, and hopefully this article brings a lot of it together. In general, I would agree that there's a lot of manipulation what I found in my research into the CIA is that their elaborate efforts to in a way, we are all the victims of a mind control experiment because they try and condition us. And they do it sometimes in very subtle way that we don't realize we're being conditioned. They do it through the education system. They do it through Hollywood movies.
Cartoons,
They do it through the media. They do it even through the alternative media. Uh,
video
and
games,
what's that?
video games.
Yeah, there are many different ways that they're trying to manipulate people's minds and get them to think in certain ways. Um, and the best antidote, from my perspective, is to do a lot of reading on your own. And often it will require reading these more off the beat, not the books that are featured in Barnes and Noble, although sometimes you can find some gems there, and sometimes there are some good books. But often you have to find these kind of more obscure books and assess. Often they are writers who've done very good research. They just didn't get the publicity because the book challenged the official story. So when it's related to foreign policy or these domestic terrorist attacks, if they're challenging the official narrative, the book is going to be shadow banned or censored. But we don't live in a totally totalitarian state, so the books are available,
If you can
and you
find
can,
them.
if you can find them through the internet. If you have a good library, they can, there are interlibrary loan systems where you can often get these books for free. There's the Open Library as a free online library that has some good books. The more reading you do, you can start to see the truth behind some of these incidents and also the patterns. Yeah. And once you see that pattern, yeah, you'd be suspicious of how we're being manipulated with regard to current events. And you can also see the historical trajectory because, I think now we're in a situation where we're losing completely our democracy and people are recognizing that. But I think a lot of people don't have the understanding of how historically we came to this place. And it leads to this Trump derangement syndrome, which it's true, Trump is a terrible man, but he should be viewed more as a symptom. And he didn't just come in and destroy democracy. This narrative you get in some liberal circle that things were fine, and then Donald Trump came in and eviscerated our democracy. But really, the democracy has been eviscerated over several generations, and it's the deep state. It's these powerful elements in the military, intelligence, and the big corporation, the oil company, the Rockefeller, the Wall Street. They're the ones. They're manipulating the public, manipulating events. And Oklahoma City is a perfect example of how we slowly lost our liberties through this strategy of tension, because it was right after Oklahoma City that this forerunner of the Patriot Act was passed that you mentioned, and had all kinds of draconian measures that made the United States much, much more into a police state. And this may have been a testing ground for the 9/11, because there were similar features, like they destroyed all the evidence, because they destroyed the building so that there couldn't be more investigations. And that's what they did after 9/11. And the building Trade Tower 7 was also destroyed. The evidence would indicate through an internal, controlled demolition with explosives in the building. And that's the formula they used with the Oklahoma City. So there are certain parallels, and we need to look at the
The
bigger
other thing
picture.
was
And
the
if we want to move
foreknowledge.
forward, just to finish briefly, removing Trump is not enough. We need a much broader, more sweeping change to reclaim our democracy.
We also see, on X, it's very often we see clips that people post. You have Hillary Clinton talking about taking over Iran. You have all of this stuff with Iran that goes way back. It's one of the countries named by in the 7 countries in 5 years. This is not something that Trump just woke up and did. It's been a long range plan. And one of the things that we've seen in doing our research on current events is that what's really happening is the whole energy market is being consolidated under the United States. That United States has gas and oil, and they're really pushing to control everything. I mean, you have the blowing up of the pipelines, you have all of the piracy, you have the shutting of Hormuz. You also have Iran being put in a position where it's blowing up facilities in the Mideast also, which is really limiting the energy flow. So yeah, Chevron is doing real well. So if we look at who benefits, at these things, we should look at Chevron. We should look at the military industrial complex. We should look at the bankers. If we want to find out really what's going on in any situation, who's making the money. So
Yeah, and the Oklahoma City, it was a boon. The Clinton legislation was a boondoggle to the military industrial complex and the police surveillance state. Uh, and people again with a suspension of rational judgment are willing to support this kind of draconian legislation that gives them what they want. And also, I mean, there are allegations that there were incriminating evidence on the Clintons that was destroyed with the bombing. And there
right,
are even,
right,
people taking boxes. I think the rescue
right.
operation was swifter to remove certain additional documents than to actually try and save people. And I mean, the Clintons have a lot of dark skeleton in their closet. So I
Well,
mean,
teams were
because
going in. I mean, the rescue workers who were there to get survivors out were miffed that all of these teams in black covered faces and military gear and black trucks were taking box loads and box loads of stuff out and just whisking it away before they even got all the bodies.
Yeah,
So you
and there
wonder
was
about
stuff
that.
related to the MENA. The Clintons were involved in serious criminal activity with drug and gun running. Overseeing an operation out of Mena, Arkansas, to arm the Nicaraguan counter-revolutionaries and laundering of
Contras.
money in Arkansas banks. Arkansas was very crucial in the Iran-Contra affair. There was all kinds of money laundering and criminal activity going on that they had to cover up. So it's thought that that may have been I don't know if that was the central motive or a side motive,
There's
was
side
to further
benefits.
protect the Clintons. And Bill Clinton was the president at that time. So what role he played in covering this all up, needs to be further traced out. I don't know if that evidence will ever emerge, but it's certainly very suspicious.
You find that with the World Trade Center too. It just so happens that they took out the area where they have the Wall Street trade files that they were doing insider trading and they were going to prosecute. That whole thing just disappears. Or when they hit the Pentagon and the offices of accounting where they just found I think it was 4 trillion missing or unaccounted for. That just so happens to be the area that the bomb hits.
Yeah, the
or
9/11
the
hijackers
plane.
somehow knew to hit that area where
There's
these
a lot of
Middle
bonuses
Eastern
with this
guys, Bin
stuff.
Laden sitting in the cave was programming it to hit the area to destroy all the documents that would expose massive corruption and crime and put all these top leaders in jail for the rest of their life where they belong.
There's all these coincidences, all of these mysterious deaths that are just suicides, and then there's all of these mysterious.
And FDR in my assassination book, the lead quote is by Franklin Roosevelt, and he said, "There are no coincidences in politics. If it happened a certain way, it was planned that way." And that's from Franklin Roosevelt, and he knew he was involved in some skullduggery too. Anybody who plays the political game gets involved and knows about that stuff. The Pearl Harbor cover-up, I think we've covered in this program. So FDR said that, and that's something we should be conscious of, and we should not listen to these fools who attack journalists and investigators. Oh, they're conspiracy theorists. We see this in the New York Times or even alternative media. They dismiss. Remember what FDR said. There are no coincidences. in politics.
Oh, back to the point that we're making is that they don't want us to do critical analysis. They want us to be obedient workers. So anytime they you're asking a question, a valid question, you want inquiry, you want to understand what's going on, they'll shut it down by saying conspiracy theory, and they'll marginalize you. Don't let that happen. You should ask the questions you want to ask. If something
And we
doesn't
need to
make
fight
sense,
back
ask.
against that. And on the left, you find a lot of that too. A lot of blacklisting and left media. You won't find out about the Oklahoma City bombing, what really happened. On a lot of the alternative media or liberal media in the country, they kind of fall into the same trap. And I think there's also a elitism because they're Oklahoman. They look down on people from Oklahoma or Arkansas, so they just kind of dismiss them. And you find that. I moved to Oklahoma in 2009, and maybe I was had some similar attitude. But the more I lived there, I really liked the people in both Oklahoma and Arkansas, and realized they have a lot of intelligence, and you can learn a lot from the people. I mean, I don't always agree with the politics, but actually a lot of the people don't like the political leaders either in those states. So that there's a lot of corruption at the top, but that's what you find everywhere. So, but I think there is this attitude, and that's wrong too. So that may be part of it. And I've seen that in the Clinton, because I wrote a book on Bill Clinton, and it kind of validated a lot of the or alleged to be conspiracy theories about all the crime that the Clinton committed. But I did research in the University of Arkansas. There are groups that were investigating Clinton that left their papers there, and they uncovered a lot. And I interviewed whistleblowers, and I kind of got a better understanding for myself. But this book was just ignored and kind of dismissed by these liberal elitists, and they have this attitude. They're just hicks from Arkansas.
We got to wrap it up. So let's just end with Jeremy. Please tell our audience how they can follow your work. Where can they buy these books? Because your books are fantastic, and I was just promoting your Obama book on a group chat because people were saying, how the Democrats are peaceful and the Republicans are, it's such. People are so brainwashed.
Yeah,
so
you have to look at the corruption
pushing your book
of the two-party system. I mean, it's a distorted view that just views. I mean, I agree with a lot of the critiques of Trump and the Republican Party, but to have a fuller perspective, we have to understand that the Democratic Party is equally and often more corrupt and sinister in some of the things we do, and that we need new parties, to actually reestablish any semblance of democracy. We need new parties, and we need a real revolution outside the two-party system.
Okay. Jeremy,
so the books can be
tell our audience
at my website.
How can they buy this?
Yeah, well, go to my website, jeremykuzmarov.com. You can go on my Substack, and I would hope that the books would more people would read them. And
your Substack's called, we have one for Uncontrolled Opposition, and then you have your own.
I have Too Hot for the Mainstream.
There we go. Okay, and that's the website.
But the books can be purchased through my website, and you can find them on Amazon.com. There's a book on the Clintons. I have a forthcoming book on political assassinations, a book exposing Obama's CIA connection and depravity.
On Syria, you just had one come out on Syria.
A book with Dan Kovalik on Syria. A book on the Russians are coming again. So. Yeah.
There's a lot of good work out there. Okay. Well, the opinions you hear are ours, not those of WBAI, the Pacifica Foundation, or the Progressive Radio Network. That wraps up our show for today. This is Uncontrolled Opposition. I'm Gloria Guillo, joined here by Professor Jeremy Kuzmarov. Remember to like and share our broadcast. Your kind support keeps us going. Please find us on Substack, Twitter X, and Podbeam. Thanks for tuning in. Hope to see you next week.
All right, that's a wrap.
All right, great job, guys.
Yeah. It was a great article. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, it was interesting.
Second read.
Yeah, I appreciate that you went through it carefully.
Oh boy, yeah.
A lot of details.
I've got pages and pages of notes.
But I owe it to the other researchers. I tried to just kind of synthesize the key research that had been done by some other writers. Who wrote books, but they were just totally marginalized, but they're very well researched, like this Hoffman book and this Craig Roberts book.
I'm interested in the subject of your next book, which is going to be. It sounds like a
Should be
playbook.
fun.
It sounds like a playbook on false flags, on these orchestrated events to make it look like the lone gunman.
Yeah.
And
Now we discussed a lot of that on the show, and
Yeah.
it starts with Abraham Lincoln and the cover up. And that was a conspiracy surrounding his assassination. And John Wilkes Booth actually, there's a strong evidence that he was not killed, that he escaped and lived to old age and died in Oklahoma. So I start with that, and that's often been misrepresented. And then go into more recent, going up through like the Vince Foster, and I cover the Kennedy and the King, and then I don't cover the Oklahoma City in that, but perhaps I'll do a follow-up book when I have time on false flag incidents in American history, and the Oklahoma City will definitely be a chapter.
it sounds like you need to put together like a playbook.
There's a lot
Like,
of stuff.
these are the
Actually,
steps.
he does have like an article that he
I
on
put
false
together an
flags.
article of a
That's excellent.
playbook. Yeah,
It's excellent.
yeah.
One thing I did want to mention that we didn't have a chance to mention is this was not in your article. This was some supplemental research that I had done. There's a lot of people claiming that he was extracted, Timothy McVeigh. And a lot of people believe that some of these, assets are extracted, and there's actually a lot behind that. And what happens is you don't see the body, or the body mysteriously is taken away, or
that he wasn't killed.
That they extracted.
Well, it's hard
not in
to
your
prove
article.
that. Yeah, I don't
not in your
know.
article.
It's possible. It's a theory, but it's not proven. So I don't know.
It doesn't belong in your article. Your article is really grounded in facts. But I'm just saying the word on the street, which I look at too, is that he was extracted. And I've seen
possibility. I mean, they're rumored that Jeffrey Epstein wasn't killed.
Exactly.
And I don't know. I mean, it's hard to know
seen with
about that for sure. It's certainly a possibility.
That rumor seems to be pretty strong too.
I've also seen with Ghislaine Maxwell. Okay, they show photos of her before and after she went into prison, and she doesn't look the same. I mean, she has a different nose, different ears, different facial structures. So, it's like they have somebody else in prison, and she's sunning herself somewhere else. So this is not. It's not unusual, and
there's evidence
these extractions.
That Jim Jones, we could do a show. Let's plan to do a show on the Jonestown. That was a CIA operation, and there's strong evidence that Jim Jones, the supposed mastermind, was not killed. They claim he killed himself, but there's evidence to believe that he was taken away and went to Brazil to live.
Well, the United States has
this witness protection. The CIA is good at faking people's death.
Well,
there's the witness protection program where they already have something in place to make people disappear. So they have, this isn't unusual. It does exist.
And then there's the claim from Argentina that Hitler survived. Moved to Argentina.
I've seen that. And I thought I dismissed that, but then there was some evidence that made me think there's a remote possibility that could be true.
I dismissed it too until the Argentinian government said it.
To our audience, Jayme and Jeremy and I talk, when we're off the air, and we're like, gee, I thought they landed on the moon. Now I guess they didn't. It's like every day there's something that you're raised with that you just took, because one of the things that we find is repetition. And if they just repeat the same thing over and over again, and they know that if they do it from the time that you're very, very young, that they implant these ideas, that that you become more sensitive to them. So every day it's like something else is gone.
The best,
for the record, I do believe in the moon landing.
People is to just keep an open mind and try and read more into it. And there are some authors who make some pretty convincing cases, so you got to hear them out.
Yeah, the other thing that I just want to say,
I do believe in the moon landing, but at this point I don't take it for its word. I do question it. I'm on the fence of whether or not the video is real. But I think we went there, but maybe the video was staged.
Well, one thing I just want to say to our audience is that, the sophisticated mind, okay? I mean, the simple mind sees things in black and white. Yes and no. If you have a sophisticated mind, you can live with contradictions. Not everything adds up. Not everything makes sense, and it's okay. You don't have to, have everything completely spelled out for you. You can entertain multiple concepts, like with the World Trade Center, for example, in 2001. I mean, there's a lot of different theories as to what happened. The only theory I don't believe is the one that's the prevailing narrative of what happened. But some say it's cold fusion, some say it was missiles, some say it's some other technology, some say it's the planes. I mean, there's lots out there, and honestly, I don't reject any of them, and I can maintain them all in my head. I just don't believe that it was these terrorists that just decided to do it with box cutters. I think that's a little far fetched.
Well, I think what's important is looking at the history of these events occurring, and as evidence comes out that shows that these things really, they're not just crazy talk, like Pearl Harbor being more of a let it happen, I guess, where because it was clear they moved a lot of the fleet south of Hawaii before the attack, so they had an indication it was coming, but they didn't alert the population there, so they'd be prepared for it, and they just let them get slaughtered. Like that would for decades, you would be ostracized for proposing that idea.
Jayme,
Now,
I got to send you stuff on the moon landing.
I've seen.
I got to run, guys, because I
okay.
have another appointment. But yeah, I agree with your point, Jamie. In fact, we did a show on Pearl Harbor before. I think we'll have to do one this year again.
Yeah. Well,
when is Pearl Harbor again?
Didn't we do that before?
No,
I'm sure
we
we've
did.
done that one.
But
We've already done it. Yeah.
Do you remember the date?
Well, I think it would have been in December.
December.
I may have done it with
2 years
pasta. I think we should plan for this December to do one.
Okay.
Yeah,
But
my point is,
because I have an appointment at 11:15. But
let me make my point real quick. My point is, we need to study these events and then learn the patterns so we can recognize those patterns when they're happening in real time. And we have two of those events right now, like the Charlie Kirk assassination with Tyler Robinson, and even the Luigi Mangione case. Both of those are looking awfully suspicious, and they seem to follow these patterns that you're identifying from these past events. And I think that's what people really need to use that as a part of their skill for their critical analysis on what's going on today. All right. So you got to get out of here.
And I think we should do a show on the Charlie Kirk as well. So.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, you should.
Maybe we'll bring Celia to come back. She's done a lot on that.
Yeah. If you did a big article,
well, it's in the conclusion of my assassination book. I have a few paragraphs on it. But yeah, I should put an article together.
If you put something together on that,
more and more, over time, a lot starts to come out, and it's easier to write in hindsight as the events are going on. It's, it's kind of a bit sketchy as to what's really going on. Then over time, more and more comes out, and you can see that clearly it was a setup. But yeah, if you voice that at the time, they start attacking you, and you may not have all the facts. It may just look a bit suspicious. But then because recently, the bull is not matching the gun in the Charlie Kirk. So
there's a ton of problems with the
Charlie
Kirk
and so that's coming out in the court documents now. So
they're going to rule it a suicide in another week.
But what you can do is take all the things that have already come out, and then just compare that to the history.
Well, now I can do that. It's been about a year or so, and there's a lot that's come out now.
It hasn't even been a year.
I could have a pretty meaty article.
6
months.
At
the time, it would just be like kind of speculation. You have to really and I give credit. There's these people on the internet. They study the video. Like they'll spend hours. I don't have the ability to spend hours analyzing the video, and then they find things. And they did that the January 6th. There's a news outlet, Revolver News, which I don't agree at all with their politics, and that's another advice to people. You have to read different websites from different perspectives. You don't have to agree with their political outlook, but sometimes they pick up on an issue and they do some good research for whatever the agenda may be. And like this guy, watched hours of January 6th videos, and he noticed certain things that were very illuminating, and he published it on his website. So it would be hard for me to do that work of sitting on the computer. But I thank him for doing that. But like people on the left didn't pick up on that because this was a right-wing website. But I mean, he did the research, and the evidence he put forward was very convincing, I think, for any independent observer. So,
and they don't always get everything right, and that's why
no.
they're discredited because they got this wrong and they
Well,
got that
some
wrong.
fear
live in
it's like any
ambiguity.
investigation. You may have a lead, something may look suspicious, and it doesn't pan out. But
Right.
I mean, they're right to raise the question and to look into it,
Exactly.
and it may not amount to much. But that's the nature of a police investigation. So and then the dominant people seize on that. Oh, they got this wrong and use it to try and discredit them. When they have the right spirit of inquiry, and they're doing what the police and media should be doing, but are corrupted.
Yeah. Well, I think if you put together an article about now and then relate it to all your historical events and show that, well, here's the pattern, how it happened before, and we're seeing that pattern right now, you might be getting phone calls from some of these bigger shows that would want to talk to you about it. Like Jimmy Dore might even give you a call or something like that.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
you're doing real well with on Fridays with you can plug that.
Plug with
Friday
Garland?
with Garland Nixon. Yeah, Jeremy's usually
Garland
on Fridays with Garland Nixon.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's wrap up.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Follow Jeremy
we'll see you
wherever
next
he
week.
shows up for interviews and support those shows as well. All right, this has been Uncontrolled Opposition. Thank you for watching very much. Also, we want to thank Craig Pasta Jardula, who helps us run the show. He's the executive producer of Uncontrolled Opposition, which is why you're watching this on Pasta to Go. Have a good weekend. We'll be back with another episode next week. Have a good one. Bye-bye.